Hello viewers, and welcome to yet another live-action commentated match of Warhammer 40,000 Conquest. My name is Mitch, and I am the Hive Tyrant. Today, I'm pleased to share with you a video sent in by none other than Alexander Chimadon. It's going to be featuring played to somewhat seldom seen warlords. On the left, we happen to have the second Dark Eldar faction warlord, Urien Rakarth, piloted by Troels Berthelsen, and on the right, we happen to have the Astra Militarum's own Torquemada Coteaz, played by Per Pedersen. In assessing our game state, we happen to see the initiative token there on the right side of the table, and our opening deploy action is the 1-1 ranged keyword Rattling Deadeye out to planet number 4. Conversely, on the opposite end of the table, we see the unique support Archon's Palace enter Urien's HQ, and that is an absolutely fantastic early game play because during each and every command phase, you simply exhaust that support, you pick a planet, you choose either the card or resource bonus, and you extinguish it entirely, including any and all rogue traders or void pirates. So the earlier you play that game, all the greater an economic disparity you accomplish over the course of the game. To the right, in Coteaz's HQ, we end up seeing a copy of the somewhat difficult to see Rockcrete Bunker, which helps preserve units by sparing them from 1 point of damage per turn. And to the left, we happen to see the very rarely played Eldar Survivalist. It costs 2 for 1 command icon, and the reason we don't really see it played is because to the right, that copy of Iron Guard Recruits for just as many resources trumps its command and shuts off that card and resource bonus. At planet number 2, we can see a copy of the 2-cost, 2-command icon Incubus Warrior, and in assessing our opening layout of planets, planet number 1 is going to be Taurus, which rewards players for keeping their unit count lower than that of their opponent in the form of 3 cards or 3 resources. Karnath is going to be planet number 2, which allows you the opportunity to trigger the battle ability of any other planet in play. Barlas is going to be planet number 3, the random card discard planet. Planet number 4 is going to be Iridial, which affords players the opportunity to pick and choose to heal one of their units entirely, and planet number 5 is going to be Ossus 4, the Steel 1 resource planet. But we've got a copy of the signature army unit Coteaz's Henchman out to planet number 1, as both of our players are deciding where exactly they would like to send their warlords during our command phase. That Coteaz's Henchman is a 1-3 with 1 command. As soon as it leaves play, you ready your warlord. We've also got a copy of the Rogue Trader out to planet number 3 for Urien. So of the just utmost importance to keep in mind is that we've got a Catachan outpost there to the right in Coteaz's HQ, and that means the naturally 0-8 Coteaz is going to be able to potentially deal at least 1 swing worth of damage without sacrificing any other units. But looks as though Coteaz ends up going to planet number 1, and Urien ends up going to planet number 3. Planet number 1 is going to be 1 card, 1 resource there for the Coteaz player. Keep in mind at any point Archon's Palace can shut down either the cards or resources at a planet. Planet number 2 is going to be 1 card, 1 resource to the left for Urien. We do see that Archon's Palace activate on something. Planet number 3 is going to be 2 cards, 1 resource for Urien. Planet number 4 is going to be 1 card to the right for Coteaz, and planet number 5 is going to be 2 resources there for Coteaz, potentially. No way really to tell what exactly the Archon's Palace shut off. Taurus is captured by our Astra Militarum player, and that looks like 1, 2, 3, 4 units in total relative to the 4 units controlled by our Dark Eldar players. So that's going to be no ability to activate Taurus, but that's going to be a couple planet-type icons for our Astra Militarum player and make it all the more likely that he's potentially going to win this game. But looks like we're going to see Barlas activated. That's a reasonably fantastic planet for Urien. The gimmick behind Urien is decreasing the cost of all torture events by 1, increasing the cost of other events by 1, and it has to do with a lot of resource deprivation, card choke, and the random discard there from Barlas could potentially work out fantastically. We see a copy of the signature event, the Emperor Protects, discarded. That's when an army unit leaves play at your warlord's planet. You can bounce it back to your hand instead of your discard pile. It's only got 1 shield icon, but given Coteaz's predilection for sacrificing units, that could nevertheless be of the paramount importance to see, but it's gone in the discard pile. HQ phase comes and goes. The initiative player shifts over to the left in the hands of the Urien Rakarth player. We've now got a new 5th planet. It's Elowith, which affords players the opportunity to tutor the top 3 cards of their deck for any one card that they would like, and to put the remaining 2 on the bottom of their deck in the order of their choosing. To the left there, we saw some interesting cards in our Dark Eldar player's hand. I know I saw a Siren Zithlex, I saw Klavex War Leader, and I also believe I saw a Crucible of Malediction, so I'll just be very curious to see indeed what exactly Urien decides to play with some of his first deploy actions here. So something to keep in mind is that, well, we see a second copy of the Eldar Survivalist put out to planet number 5, if entirely uncontested. That's going to be 3 cards and 1 resource at that planet. Urien, seeing as how he doesn't have any units in his HQ, is potentially going to be very rewarded for going to planet number 4 to negate the command icons associated with that 2-command Iron Guard recruits, and he'll also be able to ensure that he gets that Eldar Survivalist bonus. And the longer that this game goes, hopefully that Archon's Palace will put in some serious work, and Urien can accomplish that nice strong economy and just kind of shut down Coteaz, who's normally rewarded for playing a kind of fast and furious game. In regard to victory conditions, I can't really see it from glare, but if memory serves, I believe Taurus happens to have a green. There we go, confirmed, a red and a green icon. That means we could potentially see the game over as early as our current planet number 3. We see a card there of Coteaz is being assessed, and it's a copy of the signature support, the Formosan Black Ships. Whenever a non-token unit ends up being sacrificed, you can exhaust the Black Ship and put 2 1/2 Guardsman Soldier tokens into play at that same planet. We do end up seeing that copy of the Crucible of Malediction, and that's pretty simple. It's whenever you happen to play a Dark Eldar torture event, or I believe just any torture event, you simply exhaust that, you pick a player's deck, you look at the top 3 cards, and you choose and discard one of those cards. We see a copy of the Tallarn Raiders put out to planet number 1, opposite that Incubus Warrior. It's not quite enough to trump that 2 command icons, but it certainly is if it happens to have a promotion later affixed to it, and in any case, presuming a Warlord goes to that planet, it's going to be able to attack for 2. We see that Urien happens to be allied with, of course, the Eldar, as if I hadn't reached that conclusion with the Eldar Survivalists, but we see a copy of the Warlock Destructor put out to planet number 1, so that definitely means that Urien is going to want to win that planet. The Warlock Destructor has 1 command, so it's going to tie even if there's a copy of promotion put out to that copy of the Tallarn Raiders, but more importantly, it's a 3/4 unit with no downside unless it lives for the following round's deploy phase. We end up seeing a copy of promotion affixed to the Eldar Survivalist at planet number 4, so that's a little bit of reason for Coteaz to consider going to that planet in order to try to shut that down, but I imagine Coteaz is probably going to end up going to planet number 1. If Urien does not go to planet number 1, he can steal initiative, he can attack. Well, let's say he could show up with his Coteaz's henchmen, he could sacrifice those, he could attack for 3, he could trigger the Black Ship to generate himself a couple Guardsman tokens. His attack could actually be augmented to 5 with the Catachan Outpost, or Coteaz could attack for 2 because the Outpost then sacrifices henchmen, get an attack bonus on his next attack, and the henchmen leaving play would serve to ready him. But instead, we end up seeing Coteaz go to planet number 2. We see Urien end up going to planet number 1, so that's going to be very interesting indeed. Those Tallarn Raiders do not have a hope in hell of surviving against those two 3 attack units. In figuring out our command struggles here, looks as though Urien's going to get 1 card, 1 resource from the first planet. Planet number 2 is going to be 2 cards for Coteaz. Planet number 3 is going to be 1 card for Coteaz. Planet number 4 is going to be 3 resources and 1 card there to the left for Urien. Note that once again, Archon's Palace is indeed exhausted, and planet number 5 is going to be 3 cards and 1 resource there for Urien. So we're going to have a battle breakout at the first planet. That's Karnath. What's on the line is triggering the battle ability of any other planet in play. We could do a random discard. We could do a 1 resource steal. We could do that tutoring the top 3 cards type effect. But let's see what exactly we see here. Urien is going to have the initiative token at the first planet. There's 2 3-attack attackers able to potentially kill off that copy of the Tallarn Raiders. Urien himself is also attacking for 2, but let's see how this goes. We see the frail Incubus Warrior end up just killing the Tallarn Raiders. So pretty straightforward there. We don't have a staging ground or anything along those lines to surprisingly bounce additional units into play, so it looks as though we see Ossus 4 triggered, and that's going to be 1 resource gone from Coteaz, and that's going to be +1 resource there for Urien. Note that at the beginning of our following deploy phase, it's going to be up to Urien as to whether or not he wants to invest an additional resource in that Warlock Destructor or otherwise let it be destroyed. At planet number 2, we're going to see Torquemada Coteaz have an opportunity to attack that Rogue Trader. We see the Catachan Outpost augment his base attack value of 0 to 2, and the Rogue Trader's outright destroyed. That means that we're going to see Coteaz bounce at the end of combat there back to his HQ. For some reason, that copy of the Coteaz's Henchman returned with Coteaz, and I believe that was a mistake. Presuming that unit was indeed deployed to that planet, it should still be sitting at Barlas. So perhaps if we see Coteaz end up going to planet number 1 with which to grab another green strongpoint icon, hopefully that mistake will have accommodated for itself. But perfect play or not, we see a new HQ phase. We see a new 5th planet. That's going to be Planum, which affords players the chance to relocate a non-Warlord unit, moving it from or to any planet that they would like. Our Coteaz player once again happens to possess the initiative token, and both of our players are going to get 2 cards and 4 resources as our HQ phase comes and goes. So last turn we did not actually see the Crucible of Malediction used, neither did we see the Formosan Black Ship used. There's certainly a wealth of torture events there sitting in Urien's hand. He's certainly got a surplus of resources with which to use some of those. And now what exactly is Coteaz going to do to try to just stop this kind of onslaught that Urien is starting to establish? There's quite a bit of command favorability going on for Urien here just because he's trumping at planet 3 and 4, and those Eldar survivalists, if unopposed, can just reel in a ton of resources. We see a unit deployed by our Astra Militarum player at planet number 1. It's a little bit difficult exactly to tell what it is. I can only imagine that's a copy of Siren Zithlex, however, for our Urien Rakarth player at Barlas, and that's going to make it enormously difficult for our Astra Militarum player to try to take advantage of deploying any additional units to that planet, because they're all going to be arriving exhausted. And like I happened to mention from the previous round, that copy of the Coteaz Henchman should be sitting at that planet entirely ready for combat during this following round. I believe that's a Rattling Deadeye at the first planet, but I cannot be sure. But Rattling Deadeye or no, we see something much more interesting played out to planet number 2. That's going to be a copy of the Lehman Russ Battle Tank, 3 command, 4 attack, and a whopping 6 hit points. Incredibly, we see a copy of the Ichor Gauntlet put on to Urien Rakarth, and that is going to basically be his signature attachment. It affords him the opportunity of simply choosing to exhaust himself in order to replicate the effects with potentially a new target of any torture event played out by the Dark Eldar player. We see an Incubus Warrior put out to planet number 5. That's potentially going to be all the more command for Urien, and now I'll just be very curious indeed to see where Urien ends up going. There's only 4 units in total at planets for our Astra Militarum player. That copy of the Henchman should, I believe, be at planet number 1, so that's going to be a grand total of 6, but we no longer have Taurus in play, of course. I'm just trying to do the math to figure out how unlikely it is that a power from Pain is potentially really going to punish our AM player. Both of our players are deciding where exactly they'd like to send their warlords. We see Urien end up committing to planet number 2, and interestingly, we see that copy of Coteaz and his henchman touch down on planet number 3 to kind of block off the Eldar survivalists there. So planet number 1 is going to end up being 2 cards for Urien. Planet number 2, thanks to Urien, is going to be 1 card for him. Planet number 3 is going to be shut down by Coteaz. So that's going to be 2 resources for that player. Planet number 4 is going to be 3 cards and 1 resource for Urien. Planet number 5 is going to be 1 card and 1 resource for Urien as well. And, of course, note that we have indeed seen the Archon's Palace once again exhaust to deprive Coteaz of, it looks like, resource tokens. That must have been an Ossus 4 just because Coteaz has absolutely 0 resource tokens, and it's very difficult to play a preemptive barrage or the Emperor Protects or anything like that when you've got completely 0 resource tokens. So it looks as though Urien has, God, something like 10 or 12 cards in hand. That's absolutely absolutely insane. If he happens to play a combat action or really any torture event during combat here, we could see that Crucible of Malediction played. We could see Urien exhaust himself in order to replicate that effect, but Urien is going to be in danger here of potentially being bloodied, and we've got that battle tank, we've got the Rattling Deadeye. It looks as though that's a copy of what torture event is that? It must be Visions of Agony. So Urien is going to take a look at our Astra Militarum player's hand here, choose one of those cards and discard it, and then once that effect is said and done, we could see that Crucible of Malediction activate to discard one of the top 3 cards of our AM player's deck, and if Urien wants to risk exhausting himself, he could also basically replicate the Visions of Agony effect. But in assessing our AM player's hand, he's got a Suppressive Fire to exhaust a unit. We see a copy of Preemptive Barrage wisely discarded. It's 2 shields. It gives basically 3 AM units at the same planet, including Coteaz, the ranged keyword, and considering just how much attack value Coteaz can front load, that is absolutely imperative to get rid of. We do see that Crucible of Malediction activate. That's going to be 2 copies of Exterminatus. Well, it's going to be 1 copy of Exterminatus gone, and the 2 remaining cards replaced on top of the AM player's deck. And now let's see how combat goes here. That is indeed a Rattling Deadeye at planet number 1. It's going to shoot during the ranged skirmish round at Siren Zithlex. Do we see a shield discarded? Very interestingly, we do. We end up seeing a copy of Promotion used as a shield. Very curious choice. For some reason, Siren ends up with 2 points of damage. So that must be that Catachan outpost. There we go. So Siren only ended up taking 2 points of damage instead of being outright killed. I was going to say I think that promotion would have been much better spent, potentially adhered to either the Eldar Survivalist at planet number 3, presuming it lives, or potentially the Eldar Survivalist at planet number 4. But we end up seeing a Siren take a swing at that Rattling Deadeye. We see a copy of Bodyguard discarded as shields. And now what exactly are we going to see? Our combat round is going to come to an end. It's going to be the initiative token in the hands of our Astra Militarum player, and that's going to be another shield icon potentially gone from our Dark Eldar player's hand. But what exactly are we going to see? The combat round comes to a close. Are we going to see a retreat or not? I cannot imagine that our Dark Eldar player is going to want to, retreat and do a random card discard. I think being able to pick and choose a shield card is going to be better than random card discard. Looks like that was a copy of Rakarth's Experimentations, I believe, discarded as shields. Siren Zithlex is going to take a swing for 2 at the Rattling Deadeye. Interestingly, that's going to be 1 shield icon from Exterminatus and the Rockcrete Bunker blocking that damage entirely, and that means we're potentially going to see yet another round as the epic duel between the Rattling Deadeye and Siren Zithlex continues. Whose cuisine shall reign supreme? Let's see here. We're going to come to the end of a combat round, and is the Rattling Deadeye going to retreat? Is Siren going to retreat? Are either of them going to stay? If there were anything tricky that Urien could do, he could try to deplete his opponent's standing armed forces, and then the sooner you could potentially power from pain, sacrifice that Leman Russ battle tank, the better, but that's going to be a quite difficult effect to try to pull off. But let's see here. Both of our players are just mired in thought. They're contemplating their next action. I think, is that a copy of Power from Pain right there? It sure looks like it is. So that's going to be basically a pick and choose one of the units to be sacrificed for our AM player. And what exactly is he going to choose? He's got the exhausted copy of Coteaz Henchman. He's got a Rattling Deadeye at planet number 2. He's got a Rattling Deadeye at planet number 1, of course, that happens to be exhausted. And he's got that Iron Guard Recruits, but it's going to be entirely up to him. And then depending on what he chooses, of course, we could potentially see Urien use his effect to replicate that event. Looks as though we actually see the Rattling Deadeye triggered, so that that's going to be Power from Pain triggered once again. We do not see Urien replicate that effect, and because a unit was sacrificed, I suppose that's a perfectly eligible time to trigger the Formosan Black Ship, so that's going to be 2 1/2 Imperial Guardsman tokens at the first planet. I cannot help but feel as though that resolved in a way that Urien was not exactly anticipating, but let's see how things break down. So it's now going to be the opportunity for that guardsman token to, there you go, Siren Zithlex is outright killed. That is going to be Barless captured by our Astra Militarum player, and now if he's going to be able to win Iridial the following round, that could potentially mean that the game is going to be going to our AM player. So if Coteaz can win at Iridial, if he can win at Ossus 4, that's going to be 3 green strong point icons, and that is going to be the game. We see that random card discard by Barless. What exactly is going to be discarded? Let's see it. There we go. It's a second copy of Siren Zithlex. So yet another just critically important card is now going to be gone, and that's going to make it all the more likely that Urien is going to end up losing during this following turn. So we've got a Rattling Deadeye that can attack at ranged. That Ketachan outpost is exhausted, but the Rattling Deadeye could potentially kill off that copy of the Incubus Warrior. The Leman Russ Battle Tank could potentially kill off the Warlock Destructor, and either of those units could potentially deal out a mountain of damage to Urien Rakarth. But what do we have in regard to torture events? Urien certainly has plenty of resources available. I'm not sure how many cards our AM player has in hand, but for 3 resources, well, for 2 resources, we could see a copy of Searing Brand, deal 3 unpreventable damage to one of those units. I cannot actually see what that card is. We did happen to see a torture event played. Perhaps that was a copy of Searing Brand, so that would be 3 points of damage to the Leman Russ Battle Tank, if that is indeed the case, and we can either see 2 cards discarded, chosen and discarded from our AM player's hand to cancel that effect, or otherwise it's going to resolve. And of course, because that Ichor Gauntlet, we could see, and we do see, Urien is going to... we saw the Ichor Gauntlet exhaust, but we actually need to see the Warlord exhaust in order to replicate that effect. So, what are we going to see here? That is 3 unpreventable damage to the Leman Russ Battle Tank. So perhaps I've either misread the card, or that's a simple misread, because it should be Urien exhausting in order to, double the effect of the Searing Brand. Okay, so there we see Urien successfully exhaust, and we do see 2 cards discarded, so good. Always glad to see players make as few mistakes as possible, and I must have been getting ahead of myself there before doling out accusations. But seeing as how that Leman Russ Battle Tank has survived, that's at least 1 copy of the suppressive fire that was discarded. Now it's going to be that Battle Tank's opportunity to deal out a tremendous 4 points of damage to either Urien, or almost assuredly kill off the Incubus Warrior, or potentially destroy the Warlock Destructor. Something of the critical importance is to note that Urien only happens to have 1 resource remaining, and that's not nearly enough to do a Clavex War Leader. But we see the Rattling Deadeye take a shot at the Incubus Warrior. We see a card discarded as shields, so that's going to be yet another card depleted from Urien's hand. And now the Leman Russ Battle Tank is going to take a swing. I can only presume it's going to be attacking Urien, but let's see here. Iridial is on the line, and that means so long as our Dark Eldar player can ultimately win at this planet, looks as though he ends up changing his target to that Incubus Warrior, and that Incubus Warrior is going to be outright destroyed, even with the Ichor Gauntlet discarded as shields, which is now impossible because it's in play. That would have been, unable to preserve the life of that Incubus Warrior, so probably quite wisely, we see our AM player decide to retreat his units. Iridial's going to be activated, and that would have been the problem there. If our AM player would have been a little bit ballsy, say trying to push a bloodying on Urien, and then ultimately losing at Iridial, if he wouldn't have scored a bloody, all of that damage could have potentially been expunged and cleared away. That's going to be a combat we're seeing now at planet number 2. Planet number 3. That's going to be the Iron Guard recruits taking a swing. They're the Eldar Survivalist. They're going to end up taking a single point of damage. And yeah, it looks as though we saw an erroneous discard there of our Eldar Survivalist. So just 1 point of damage is not exactly going to be fatal, but I'm not sure if we saw a shield. Okay, good. So we do see 1 damage token. Wanted to make sure I wasn't making a mistake there. And now Coteaz leaps away from that planet. And just remember that that henchman should have technically, I believe, been at our now planet number 1. But we see another HQ phase come and go. Just just like the sunrise and the sunset. That's going to be 4 resources and 2 cards for each of our players. We do not have a new planet number 5 at this point. Our new planet number 1 is going to be Iridial, and once again, it's going to be of the paramount importance that our Urien player tried to defend that planet by any and all means possible. So that Warlock Destructor is sitting there. That's going to cost Urien 1 resource to keep that in play. The initiative token happens to belong to Urien, and now let's see what exactly our Coteaz player can do to either try to win planet number 1 or otherwise potentially win at Ossus 4 there. Urien has 1 red and 1 blue icon, so if Urien wins our current planet number 1 and then ends up winning our current planet number 3, that could be the game going to Urien, but he's going to have to make sure his opponent does not win at Ossus 4 or at planet number 1 before that. We actually see a very interesting card play. We see Urien's signature support. Urien's Oubliette played out to played into Urien's HQ, and that means that the opponent always plays with the top of their deck revealed, which is critically important because you resolve command struggles planet by planet, so unless you're drawing more than 1 card at a time, you know pretty much every single card that's coming off of your opponent's deck. And then Urien's Oubliette affords you the opportunity to either have both players discard the top card of their deck, or to have both players draw the top card of their deck, if memory serves. Looks as though he has both players draw the top card of their deck right there. We can see that the top card of that deck to the right is going to be a Void Pirate, so a lot of potential income there for our Astra Militarum player. We do happen to see a copy of the Rogue Trader put out to planet number 2, and now Urien is definitely going to have to shore up planet number 2 before it becomes a big problem. In regard to torture events, what exactly could we see from Urien? We could see more Searing Brands to deal unpreventable damage or force discards, so, you know, card choke is absolutely fantastic, or killing units is equally good. We could see Power from Pain to necessitate the sacrifice of additional units. We could see Visions of Agony to choose and discard opponents' cards from their hand. We saw some unit put out to planet number 3, but owing to the glare, it's absolutely impossible to tell what exactly that is, and looks as though we see our player to the right straightening up all those cards at planet number 2 nicely. Our players have decided to kind of spread out these planets, seeing as how they're slowly but surely dwindling away from the Traxxas sector. There are fewer and fewer worlds with which to conquer, so let's see. I've sort of lost track in regard to which player's opportunity it is to deploy. Nice thing about that Urien's Oubliette is that its use is an action, so it's a nice little bit of a deploy stall for you to gain more information from your opponent. The, more deploy actions you can force them to take, the more information you have, the more likely you are going to be able to easily trump all your opponent's command presence, and I really wish I knew what exactly that was sitting at planet number 3. It's going to be opposite an Eldar Survivalist. It definitely doesn't take much to shut those units down, and quite frankly, it does not take much to trump them entirely. It could be a Sanctioned Psyker or an Iron Guard Recruits, but at planet number 1, we end up seeing the 2/2 flyer for 2, the Hellion Gang, which is making it relatively unlikely, I think, that our Astra Militarum player might end up winning at that planet. And yet another difficult to perceive card. I think that might be a copy of Rattling Deadeye at planet number 3. But hopefully, if battle does erupt at that planet, our players will shift these cards around a little bit to help with glare. We do see a copy of Void Pirate put out to planet number 3, played by Urien Rakarth. And we actually see a second copy of Void Pirate, so that's going to make it much more likely that Coteaz is going to want to go to planet number 3, but to drop off all of those units he happens to have in his HQ, I definitely don't know if it's worth it. Coteaz, I can only imagine, is going to go to planet number 2 to try to make sure it's going to be as difficult as possible for Urien to set himself up at that planet, and indeed, that is exactly what we see. Coteaz is going to be dropping off a Rattling Deadeye, he's going to be dropping off 2 Guardsman tokens, and he's going to be dropping off a Leman Russ battle tank, all exhausted, albeit at planet number 2, which means that during our HQ phase, they're all going to ready for the subsequent round, and they're going to be ready to absolutely wreck Urien. But planet number 1 is going to be 1 card for Urien there on the left, and I apologize that the glare is starting to make things a little bit difficult to perceive. Planet number 2 is going to be potentially 3 resources there for Coteaz, but I can only imagine that the Archon's Palace is indeed going to shut all that business down. Planet number 3 is going to be something like 4 cards for our Urien player, which is absolutely nuts. And then planet number 5 is going to be an additional card and an additional resource for our Urien player. So can Coteaz manage to win this one? It's all going to come down to our battle at next round's planet number 2. Is Urien going to be able to just do enough to destroy this enormous onslaught of units here? Let's see how it goes. We're going to see a battle at planet number 1. That's going to be Iridial, which is the healing planet. It's entirely irrelevant to anything Urien needs to accomplish. None of Urien's units, apart from that Eldar survivalist, are at all wounded, and I happen to forget about the existence of that Eldar survivalist. So that means that it's going to be an additional 1 card and 1 resource for Urien at planet number 1, and because I forgot about the Eldar survivalist at planet number 3, that's going to be a whopping 5 cards and 1 resource, all from the same planet. So good mother of God, I bet you Coteaz is wishing that he had an Archon's Palace of his own about 20 seconds ago. But let's see how combat resolves at Iridial. Coteaz only has a single resource token. He's allied. I cannot actually recall which faction he's allied with, but if he happens to have picked Space Marine, we could see an eager recruit. If a unit were to leave play, a soldier or warrior, we could have seen an Elysian assault team, but that does not end up being the case, and that means that Urien is in the position to potentially win the game at our soon-to-be planet number 2, but we see Ossus 4 triggered by Coteaz, absolutely uncontested by our Dark Eldar player there at Ossus 4, and we're going to see a new HQ phase come and go. That's going to be 4 resources, 2 cards for both of our players. Ossus 4 is going to be our new first planet. What is Urien going to be able to do to try to block off the opponent's victory condition at that planet? That is a landslide of units sitting there. We've got the Formosan Black Ship. We've got Coteaz himself. We've got the Rockcrete Bunker. We've got a Catachan Outpost. We've got Coteaz's henchmen that could potentially attack for 1, then be sacrificed, then ready Coteaz again, so he could say Guardsman token could attack, then Coteaz could sack the Guardsman token, attack for 3, then we could see the Coteaz henchman attack for 1, then we could see the henchman sacrificed, Coteaz gets readied, then he attacks for 3 again. This could just be an absolute nightmare here for our Dark Eldar player, and let's hope to high hell that he has enough resources to play all the Clavex war leaders in the world. Coteaz is trying to push his resource advantage there at planet number 1, his economic advantage, and he's going to end up putting a Void Pirate out at that planet. Something that's very nice is that if Archon's Palace chooses to shut down the 3 resources associated with that planet, because there are now 2 Void Pirates at that planet, the opponent will have to pick and choose either the 3 resources or the 2 cards, but not both. And depending on how things break down at additional planets, Coteaz could potentially see quite a bit of income here, but I have absolutely no idea how many resources our Dark Eldar player happens to have. We see a copy of 2 arms on top of Coteaz's deck, and I bet you he's wishing that he happened to have that in his hand, just because if Coteaz sacrifices a, pretty much any unit at planet number 1, that could be the Formosan Black Ship, putting into play 2 additional Guardsman tokens, then 2 arms could potentially ready the Formosan Black Ship, and then that's going to be 2 additional Guardsman tokens, so an incredibly powerful signature support, but let's see how things ultimately end up being resolved. Note that the initiative token happens to be in the possession of the Coteaz player, and one of the things that Coteaz does best is preemptive barrage, and then hitting like a truck. So that 2/2 Bloodied Reavers that our Urien player put out to planet number 1 may not end up making that much of a difference, even if it ends up attacking for 4, or rather, even if it ends up having the potential to attack for 4, that doesn't necessarily mean that it will have the opportunity to do so if it's destroyed at ranged. And of course, there's certainly going to be a fair few units showing up alongside Urien when he goes to the first planet. But that doesn't mean that they're going to be doing a lot because they're exhausted. We do indeed see both of our players opt to go to the first planet. And how are things going to resolve here? Interestingly, we've got Urien with only 1 ready unit. He's got an Eldar Survivalist. He's got that Warlock Destructor, which by now will have cost him 4 resources if memory serves. We've got that exhausted Hellion gang, and then just an enormous number of AM units there. So that Rattling Deadeye is naturally going to be attacking for range, potentially for 3, with the assistance of the Catachan outpost, and potentially for more, owing to if there happens to exist a copy of 2 arms or something like that. One of Urien's biggest weaknesses is that all Dark Eldar non-torture events, or I believe just all non-torture events he plays, have their cost increased by 1. I'm not sure if it's okay, so it must have been 2 cards that Urien decided to shut down at planet number 1. Anyway, Urien, what I'm trying to say is it costs him 3 resources to do something like an Archon's Terror. So compared to something like a Clavex War Leader, I think you're much more likely to play the latter card than the former. So planet number 1 is going to be 3 resources there to the right for Coteaz. Planet number 2 is going to be a whopping 5 cards and 1 resource again for our Dark Eldar player, and if there's anything he's going to be able to potentially do well, it is shield the bejesus out of his units there. And planet number 3 is also going to be 1 card and 1 resource there for Urien. So Urien has, gosh, it almost looks like he's holding his entire deck in hand as opposed to just cards. So he's going to have a tremendous surplus of shield cards. It looks as though he's almost got all 3 of his Clavex War Leader there in hand, but I cannot see more than 2 resource tokens, so I'll be very curious if there's part of the playmat clipped that has a bunch of resource tokens I'm not aware of. We could still see the Ichor Gauntlet used for some sort of effect, but what exactly are we going to see? There we see the copy of the Clavex War Leader. Gee, I wonder what the only eligible target is. Maybe it's going to be that Leman Russ battle tank? The answer is yes, it is. So that Leman Russ battle tank is going to be outright destroyed. Sorry, Rockcrete Bunker cannot save you. And of course, the Formosan Black Ship does not have the opportunity to trigger quite yet. So, considering that Coteaz has the initiative token, I think that's definitely a reasonable time with which to put into play a copy of the Clavex War Leader. I believe we see the copy of the Catachan Outpost Exhaust. That's going to be the Rattling Deadeye, I believe, augmented up to a base attack value of 3. And what exactly are we going to see as the target? I think the prime target's going to be that Bloodied Reavers. They've got a 4 attack value at present. But what exactly are we going to be seeing as shields? I know Suffering is going to be a 2 shield icon card, as is Shadowfield. For the life of me, I cannot remember if Visions of Agony is 1 shield icon or not. And of course, our Dark Eldar player has his hand underneath the table, and I cannot discern anything apart from purple text boxes. But let's see if that Bloodied Reavers is going to be worth saving. Certainly, Urien is going to want to be able to do everything he can do to try to spare that effect. Looks as though that was actually targeting the Clavex War Leader. I feel as though that was a little bit of a mistake, just considering the just enormous number of cards that our Dark Eldar player happens to have in hand. It's it's a statistical anomaly to not have a 1 shield icon card, and that's indeed going to just be 2 points of damage dealt out to the Clavex War Leader. I believe that was a Visions of Agony discarded as 1 shield, but the initiative token still happens to be in the possession of Coteaz, and imagine how combat would have gone differently had Coteaz had a copy of Preemptive Barrage. It looks as though we see a copy of the Rogue Trader sacrificed to Coteaz, and interestingly, we do not see the Formosan Black Ship activated, so Coteaz is going to be able to potentially attack for 3. If we had a Preemptive Barrage, we could have done like Coteaz, plus the Iron Guard recruits, plus the Henchmen. They all could have attacked. Then we could have seen the Henchman sacrifice to ready Coteaz, give him +3 attack. Then he could have attacked again at ranged, but we see Coteaz take his swing of 3. He ends up managing to successfully kill that Clavex War Leader. Another Dark Eldar Incubus is now gone from that planet. We take a quick peek at the copy of Coteaz's Henchman there, and now it's all going to be up to Urien. How exactly is he going to try to salvage this? Something of the paramount importance to keep in mind is that even though we've got that copy of the Formosan Black Ship sitting at that planet, I don't know if we happen to have any copies of 2 arms or anything like that. There we go. That's going to be a copy of Searing Brand, dealing 3 points of damage to Coteaz's Henchman, and that is not going to be prevented. So let's see here. That's going to be a dead Henchman, and that means they cannot be sacrificed. They're not going to be able to ready Coteaz, and that means we're not going to see the 2 additional Guardsman tokens yet. But we've got a copy of the Bloodied Reavers still ready. We've got Urien Rakarth still ready. Interestingly, he did not exhaust himself Come to think of it, I think that Searing Brand maybe has to be played at a planet where there is no enemy warlord, so that may have been a bit of a misplay. The Bloodied Reavers end up taking a swing for 4 at Coteaz himself. We see the Rockcrete Bunker used to mitigate that damage down to 3, so that's going to be 5 hit points remaining there for our Astra Militarum Warlord. But what is going to occur next? It's going to be our AM player's opportunity to attack. He's got the Iron Guard recruits and those 2 guardsman tokens, all of which are 1/2 units. So what exactly are we going to see destroyed? The Iron Guard recruits exhaust. That's going to be a 1 potential point of damage dealt out to the Bloodied Reavers. There's certainly nothing along the lines of a crushing blow or anything like that to worry about. And at this point, if our Astra Militarum player has any cards in hand left, I would imagine thanks to that Visions of Agony and a keen memory, our Urien player might know entirely what all there is to expect. So, Urien takes a swing, deals 2 points of damage to Torquemada Coteaz. That's going to be a guardsman token jeopardizing the life and well-being of that Bloodied Reavers for 1 point of damage. Are we going to see a shield discarded to preserve that 4-value attacker or not? Yes, I believe that was a copy of Soul Seizure based on the garish blues and reds of the artwork. That's going to be a preserved unit, and now it's going to be yet another attack from that 1 remaining guardsman token, and then nothing other than just 2 void pirates likely going to be running away from that planet. Looks as though we've got a copy of Rakarth's Experimentations there, but is that going to be played? Yes, it is. Looks as though we see the calling out of some card type. There we see another copy of Rakarth's Experimentations. It probably doesn't matter what card type we call out at this point. And there's a 3rd copy, so that must mean our Astra Militarum player has no cards remaining in hand. That's going to be 3 consecutive points of damage dealt out to Coteaz. That means Coteaz is going to be bloodied and banished from that planet. I believe he's something like a 1/6 on his bloodied side. Memory is kind of failing me at the moment, but that's going to be Coteaz banished from that planet. And now we're going to see that Crucible of Malediction triggered, and our options for discard are going to be a copy of 2 Arms, or Mystic Warden, or Steel Legion Chimera to be discarded. So we see a copy of 2 Arms discarded upside down. Thank you very much there to the right. Our AM player corrects that orientation mistake. So, what exactly are we going to see? Note that at this point, we've yet to see our copy of the Formosan Black Ship basically being used to generate additional guardsman tokens, and I cannot help but think that would have been critically important to help make a big bit of a difference in this potentially last battle of the game here. But we see the guardsman token take another swing at that copy of Bloodied Reavers. The Reavers end up saved thanks to the timely discard of a shield card, and that's going to bring us to the end of combat round here. Are we going to see those 2 Void Pirates retreat? There's really no reason to keep them at that planet in case they end up being simply destroyed, so a retreat is going to be perfectly fine. It's not as if they're sitting there serving as fodder for Coteaz to exhaust. I don't think our AM player has any cards remaining in hand, but well, if he had a suppressive fire, that would have been a reasonable choice for it. Looks as though we actually see some of these units retreat. In fact, we see all of these AM units retreat, and that means that Urien is going to end up winning that battle. That's going to be Ossus 4 triggered. That's going to be 1 resource stolen, and that means that Urien is going to have 2 green strong point icons. He's going to have 2 blue technology icons, and he's also going to have 2 red material icons. All of those units are going to bounce back to Urien's HQ, and it's all going to come down to that battle at Eluith. Note, at this point, if Urien wins the fight at Eluith, that means Urien is going to take the game. Planum happens to be worth a blue and a green icon, so if our, well, I guess if our game ends up going to the 7th planet, there's no longer going to be, well, okay, I'm sorry, I looked at that wrong. So, our Astra Militarum player still could conceivably win at the final planet, but he cannot win through Eluith. So, what Urien could simply do is try to deposit all of his units at Planum and try to block off his opponent's victory condition there, or he could simply commit all of his forces to our current planet number 1. Note that at this point, Urien happens to possess the initiative token. There is a Rattling Deadeye sitting at planet number number 1, which is going to be able to potentially shoot for 3 during the ranged skirmish round, thanks to the Catachan outpost. But one of the problems now is that if Coteaz wants to send all of his Astra Militarum units to planet number 1, he's going to risk being killed himself. So Coteaz will have to touch down on that planet, then he'll have to use a combat action to retreat, and then some of his other units are going to have the opportunity to attack. So what exactly are we going to see from Urien here? Note that we've got at least a couple copy. Oh my god. We're going to see a Siren Zithlex put out to the first planet, and what is the one card that you don't want to see when it's the very first deploy action of the last round of the game? When it all comes down to one planet is a Siren Zithlex. Now it's going to be each and every additional unit played at that planet. Coming into play exhausted, that's going to be a copy of the Steel Legion Chimera put into play exhausted. It's going to be 1 point of damage prevented by each of these units. Interestingly, we're going to see Urien's Oubliette force a discard from the top of our Astra Militarum player's deck. I believe that's actually both players have to discard the top card of their decks, but I could certainly be wrong, and that's a Steel Legion Chimera discarded, and that's another Steel Legion Chimera on top of our Astra Militarum player's deck. We see a copy of the Mystic Warden put out for free at the first planet, although it's exhausted. That's going to be a 2/2 unit. And that 2/2 is going to basically be sacrificed when a battle when a battle ends at the planet at which it's located. I can't see the Warlock Destructor anywhere, so Urien must have allowed that to die at some point, and Urien plays a brand new Warlock Destructor at our first planet. Both players are going to opt to send their standing forces to the first planet. That's going to be an incredible 5 additional cards and 1 additional resource for our Urien player. He's got to actually be in danger of drawing through his entire deck at this point, although it is off screen and we cannot see it. And at planet number 2, that's going to be yet another card and 1 additional resource there for Urien. So battle is going to be just ridiculous here at this planet. Note that Coteaz, I believe that's actually a 1/5, so he is just incredibly vulnerable. He's going to be able to attack during the ranged skirmish round with his Rattling Deadeye, potentially for 3 to kill off that Siren Zithlex or something along those lines. It's impossible to discern how many resource tokens Urien happens to possess, but 4 is all that you need to put into play a Clavex Warleader, and certainly a Clavex Warleader would be an absolutely fantastic option to kill off that Steel Legion Chimera. But let's see how exactly combat is going to break down. Urien's going to have the initiative after that Rattling Deadeye attacks. Urien's likely going to be able to get off an attack, and then Coteaz is presumably going to retreat. But let's see how things go. So, there's still plenty of combat-relevant events that we could see our Dark Eldar player use, but let's see what some of these effects are going to be. So, like I said, Urien doesn't really have any supports that are relevant. We could see Visions of Agony. We could see Power from Pain. We could see a 4th copy of Rakarth's Experimentations, which you just name a card type. If your opponent can't discard a card of that type, it's 1 damage to their Warlord. Last turn we saw three of those played back to back to back. We do finally see that Rattling Deadeye exhaust. It's without the assistance of a Catachan outpost, and that's going to be targeting, I cannot exactly tell what unit that is. It's not the Hellion Gang, but what exactly is it? It's going to be 1 incoming point of damage. There we see a copy of Promotion discarded as shields, and therefore the glare-ridden mystery unit is likely going to be spared from being destroyed. We see the Warlock Destructor take a swing. I can only imagine that's going to be at the Steel Legion Chimera. Actually, we end up seeing that at Coteaz, and that's a little bit of a mistake. That should have been the Steel Legion Chimera reducing that damage to 2, and then that Rockcrete Bunker can, of course, also be used. Very interestingly, and a little bit suicidally, we actually see Coteaz benefit from the Catachan outpost. He's going to take a swing of 3 and successfully kill off Siren Zithlex, and that is going to be another unit taking a swing at Coteaz there. That's going to be 2 points of damage. Maybe that mystery glare-ridden unit is actually going to be the Bloodied Reavers. That was Urien himself that dealt out that damage to Coteaz. So playing a very dangerous game here. We see the end of a combat round occur. I suppose Coteaz is now going to be able to retreat at the end of the round, and he's going to be able to bounce back into his controller's HQ, and now all of these units are going to be ready, and it does look as though that was indeed a copy of the Bloodied Reavers that was spared from being destroyed. So this is going to be a very difficult battle indeed for our Astra Militarum player, and I can only advise him to get Coteaz as far as possible away from that planet, just because you are jeopardizing the game. The longer you keep your Warlord there, there's no penalty whatsoever to retreat, so you did it. You did your brave, ballsy, courageous thing, and there we go. Coteaz is going to escape to the safety of his HQ. Whether the game ends on this planet or not, Coteaz will live to fight another day. So looks like that was a copy of the Bloodied Reavers attacking that Steel Legion Chimera. That's going to be a grand total of 3 points of damage and 1 assigned to the Rockcrete bunkers. That unit ends up being spared at the last possible moment. Perhaps the Hellion Gang or Urien himself will end up finishing off that unit. But what exactly will we see? Something interesting to keep in mind is that during long, protracted combats like this one, Urien could potentially benefit multiple times from replicating torture events because he can, replicate his whatever events he plays through the Ichor Gauntlet multiple times if he's going to be readying at the end of each combat round. We end up seeing that copy of the Bloodied Reavers destroyed, and that's going to be the Hellion Gang nicely dealing the killing blow to that Steel Legion Chimera. Now that's going to basically ready all of these other units to be dealt 1 point of damage each time they take an attack through conventional means. Urien is slowly but surely running out of units, but hopefully Urien still has quite a few shield cards in hand. We see the Mystic Warden take a swing at the Warlock Destructor. That's going to be 2 points of damage dealt out to it. Now we could likely see the Warlock Destructor take a swing, kill off the Iron Guard recruits, or the Rattling Deadeye, or a Guardsman token. What exactly are we going to see? The Warlock Destructor swings, and it's going to be the Iron Guard recruits, an army unit outright killed, so that is going to be gone. Urien himself is potentially going to be able to kill off either the Guardsman tokens or one of the Mystic Warden. I don't think our AM player has any cards left at all. We can see our Warlock Destructor takes a 3rd point of damage. There, Urien is going to potentially kill off the ready remaining Guardsman token. That's going to be outright killed. Now it's just going to be 2 Rattling Deadeyes left. That's going to be the Warlock Destructor killed. Ouch, that definitely hurts Urien's game there. Just because Urien only has that Hellion Gang left, he's only got himself left. He's got the Eldar Survivalist, which is entirely worthless, and he's got a couple additionally worthless Rogue Traders. The Rattling Deadeye is going to successfully deal out 1 point of damage to the Hellion Gang, and that's going to be a lot of 0 attack units all exhausted. Looks as though there might actually be 2 copies of the Eldar Survivalist sitting at this planet, and that means that would have been an incredible 6 cards and 2 resources here won by Urien. So what exactly are we going to see? Urien is digging through his hand for combat-relevant events. I saw a lot of things like Void Pirates, Clavex War Leader, Archon's Palace. We see the Hellion Gang take a swing of 2 at the Mystic Warden. The Mystic Warden is outright killed. Now it's only going to be 3 attacking units left. For our Astra Militarum player, is Urien himself going to end up winning this one? We see the Hellion Gang outright destroyed by the Rattling Deadeye. That's going to be the Guardsman token, potentially slain by Urien Rakarth himself. I've long said that Urien Rakarth is overpowered, and there we see it. That's going to be GG, so good game. Congratulations there. To the left are Urien Rakarth playing Troels Berthelsen. Congratulations to him, and very well played by both of our players today. So, as per usual, thank you for watching. Thank you to Alexander Chimadon for providing me with this footage in the first place. A very long game, but very spectacularly played. Not without a couple mistakes here and there, but hopefully they don't have a tremendous effect in regard to the outcome for this game. But in any case, I'll just end this video by saying, as always, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe to my channel if you've not done so already, or if you are already subscribed. As ever, you're always encouraged to share this content, as the more likes, the more views these videos receive, the more subscriptions the Hive Tyrant channel incurs. All of it means more people are more likely to be exposed to this game. Give it a try, like what they experience, join our community, and of course, all together, we continue to send the message to Fantasy Flight Games to continue to support this fantastic product. If at any point you'd like to get in touch with me, feel free to contact me through Facebook or on Twitter, as I'm always on the lookout for additional games to spectate, commentate, and record. And I would be absolutely honored if, like Alexander Chimadon, you were interested in providing me with live action footage of your own. If at any point you feel so inclined to help support the Hive Tyrant channel, I'd be honored were you to investigate and subsequently donate to my Patreon. But in any case, I'll just say thank you once again for watching, and as always, be sure to check back in again soon for ever more Conquest LCG content to come.